boy clean, man.
No, for real.
All right, so this is going to be my post-trip maintenance that we do on our bikes. We normally do this after every large ride, especially going to Turkey Bay. We rode these things probably a total of 8 to 10 hours of total time that we drove the bikes, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. I normally say to change the oil in these engines at about 20 hours. But honestly, if you're riding like we did, where you're really getting the motors warm and stuff, I would do the oil change after every 10 hours or so, or after every large ride. Like if you go to any of these events that they have for mini bikes, probably go ahead and change the oil when you get back. We're going to maintenance the CVT. We're going to check our belt, swap it out if it has any kind of wear on it. Then we'll check the valve lash on the head. We're going to check out our exhaust, our fuel filter. We're going to make sure our carb doesn't have any dirt in it from an air filter leaking. And then our biggest, this is our only fail on a mini bike, was this wheel. It's hard to see, but that is one side wheel bearing blue. So we're going to check both wheel bearings. We'll check the bearings in this jack shaft here. And other than that, we should be pretty good. Also check the chain. Our chain could be tensioned a little bit more. Let's first tackle this front wheel and wheel bearing issue. Look at this. The nut was actually hand tight. We tightened it, but it beat its way loose. Hopefully it didn't hurt the fork any. This side of the shaft is clean. This side, it isn't wore. This is perfectly fine, but you could see where it was flopping in there. You can see that there. That's the bearing grease. Oh shoot. There's the inner tube. There's a bunch of the ball bearing. So shattered that thing completely out. Oh yeah, that thing is completely shot. There's a part of a race that came out of the inside of that. Oop. So let's knock this bearing out and get it swapped out. We don't even have front disc brakes on this bike, but I'm going to get a caliper mount so we can add on to it. That's why I didn't remove this. I don't use front brakes much, but there's some rubber O-rings that go on that. These O-rings go on this tube here on each side. There's one of our seals for our bearing. This bearing was beat up quite a bit, completely shot. So I had to order the bearings for the front wheels, so we're gonna go ahead and change the oil. So this is the Chinese parts engine that we just built. That's about expected on any of these engines. So that's like metal that's sticking to this magnetic dipstick. You can get these on rbgcarts.com. You can run 2 of them on most bikes. Some of them, sometimes some bikes, it gets in the way of the jack shafter or something like that on the back. So, but you just clean it after every ride, get that magnet super clean, and it's good to go. So I don't know if you can see the metallic color to that oil, but it's definitely metallic-y. So definitely had some metal in it. I mean, you can see it really strong right there. So it'd be good to pull this engine apart soon to see what kind of damage it has inside. All right, with the oil drain, we're gonna go ahead and pull this CVT off. We're just gonna pull the bell, leave the rest of it on there. So after you get that out, you can use a 10 mil Allen. Pull out that center bolt, and this bell will actually come right off. There was a lot of mud and trash in there. So what we can do, I mean, there's a lot of buildup of mostly dirt. So we can spray this down. You can actually pull this completely off now. We can make sure to clean this completely with brake fluid or brake cleaner. Make sure there's no flat spots on this. It's actually wearing really good. So we'll spray this completely out. with brake cleaner. Do the same thing to this, get it really clean, and then we'll prep it with some dry graphite lube. Now we can try to rotate this belt off here. So this belt I wouldn't throw away, but it is coming apart. So this is a good backup belt. Again, these things are cheap, but still, it's nice to have these laying in the toolbox for a rainy day. So we'll put a fresh belt on there for sure. Everything, the bell feels good. If this has any rust or any buildup, it's good to sand this. The other side bell, make sure there's no grooves, which there is none on this. This is all clean. I go ahead and I spray those parts with dry graphite lube. Just don't get any kind of lube on this bell, of course. And this is a 669. So let me find the right belt. So we have a little bit of play, flat sides in. Now we can slide this pulley on, get those teeth lined up. Same thing. Now that thing is fully maintenance. Normally the back one, you would check these little pucks, which actually this is going to need to be replaced as well. It's really hard to tell, but this shoe right here is starting to crack. So that definitely, this one's good, that one's good, but this one's starting to split. I don't know if you guys can see that split right there, but that is definitely, that split is going to definitely end up breaking this little shoe completely in half. So you can rebuild these. They're not much money to just replace them and just keep this one for parts. So I may real fast go ahead and swap this out with a new one. So like I said at the meetup, we didn't have any filter lube, so we hosed these down with Multi-Max from PB Blaster, and it actually worked extremely well at keeping dirt out of our filters. I just knocked my filter off during a ride, or sorry, when I was putting it on the trailer, and didn't put it back on. So we've hosed this one down, and you can see that it's wet with that blaster. Doesn't hurt a bit. It burns if it gets in there. So now we got a brand new filter. Oh, forgot our pull start. You can say that thing's failing, and we broke the cord off of it. So I'll go ahead and replace this as well with a new pull start. You can see the teeth are sticking a little bit, and it's probably where there's so much dust and stuff in this thing. So we can actually just put a handle on this and it'll be good. But I will spray this real quick with some blaster. So I sprayed it out with brake clean and put Multi-Max. You can see the fingers are kicking out pretty smooth now. So we can put this back on, then put a handle on it. So the next thing I would do is check the fuel filter. Everything looks clean in this one. This is a fresh one right before we left, but everything is good with this, so I'm not going to swap it out. Now normally I would say to go ahead and check your valve lash after a good ride, check your spark plug, clean your spark plug with the wire brush and stuff. But we're actually gonna, in the next video, pull this engine, look over everything, pull the rod out and stuff, and see how this engine is wearing. Just to look at how those Chinese parts are done. So we're not gonna really worry about that with this engine. Now we can move on to Lonnie's bike. Everything's good with this one. Our chain looks good, and we're waiting on wheel bearings for that wheel. So we oiled these chains in between every ride on these bikes. So we made sure to keep oiling them, and of course they still have moisture and stuff in them. But if your chain's still good, you can actually, the best thing to do is use something like Multimax or PB Blaster, just the standard stuff, and put it in a gallon Ziploc bag and just let it soak for a while, and it'll eat all the crap out of that chain and re-lube it. So this chain actually feels pretty good. It looks like gold chain, the DID gold chain, which is my favorite stuff to use. It's a little stronger, but 40 chain from like Co-op and stuff works perfectly fine in these bikes. 40 chains has wider teeth on the sprocket, so you can use 40 on 420, but not vice versa. The thing I like about 40 is it has a little play. It's not so tight on the sprocket, so it's a little bit more forgiving if your sprockets aren't perfectly lined up. Where this stuff, it bites super tight. You can see where it's eating around the sprocket. It's eating some of our sprocket off. The back side's flat, but this side's biting. So that means our chain is more riding towards the inside of the tire. So I like to take my chain, my master link, everything. I'd like to use this actually in a Ziploc container because you can reuse it. But I just hose it down. And I'll reuse this bag for several chains. Massage it around a little bit to break all that gunk out of there and just let it soak over. We're waiting on wheel bearings so I can let it soak overnight, and that'll really eat all that crap out of that chain. You can see all the grime that it's getting out of there. Works pretty good. Our brake is dragging a little bit, but I'm really just listening for our wheel bearing, feeling if there's any slop in it, which there's not. But I'm sure this wheel bearing needs to be swapped out. And you can get 10 of these wheel bearings for $10 on Amazon. Links are in the video description. For the axle bearings, should be the same on front and rear, which is a 6002 RS. I think it's a 15 millimeter inside board, 32 millimeter outside board, 9 millimeters wide is what that bearing is. And I just ordered 20 of them so we can swap out all of our box bearings with that. I don't hear anything other than the brake grab. So actually this is good. We got our chain soaking. We're waiting on those front bearings. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do those today. Then I made sure to clean my shocks real good. And eventually I'll have to replace these shocks. They're getting pretty beat up, but they're not leaking right now, so they're still good. So last thing to check is brake pads on this bike. So I'm checking these brake pads. I mostly just look at how much, it's very hard to show you, but how much meat is left on my pads. These actually did pretty good. I don't know, again, it's hard to show you guys, but I just look in there and see how much thickness, and I'm pretty used to these brakes, so I know their stock thickness. And these are actually still about half life or so. After one more good ride, I'll have to change these out because we only have rear brakes, so of course we tend to use them a lot more. And then I just go along, check every bolt that I possibly have on this bike. I do use lock nuts everywhere as I can. Lock nut down here, swing arm, shocks have them. I make sure to use lock nuts everywhere as I can so we don't have to keep, you know, tightening up bolts. And we can also spin around our jack shaft now to see if we can feel any rough spot. These are fairly new bushing or bearings. I would expect them to be in good shape still, but it's still a good time to check. So we went ahead and pulled the engine off this bike because we want to see how those Chinese parts we used in this engine are wearing. We're going to see if anything's wore out, so make sure to stay tuned for the next video. I don't know if it's going to come out before this video or after, but we do go through this entire engine and see how these parts are holding up. Now, I don't recommend the Chinese parts. I recommend supporting these American companies that's innovating on these engines and building new parts, but we just wanted to show you how these parts can hold up. And this engine did have a lot of vibrations, so that's one thing. Lonnie's engine had the EC Stroker 236 on it, and it ran way smoother than this engine, and I just highly recommend using name brand parts. So make sure to stay tuned for that video where we break this thing down and see how these Chinese parts are wearing. So we got our new bearings in, so we're going to grease this up real nice. Get that greased up. So it has this tube that goes inside that really just helps the bearings not to crush inwards, even though it's already kind of protected. So we're going to slide that down with a little bit more grease. Here are our new bearings. These are 6002 RS bearings. Get them on 10 packs on Amazon for cheap, super cheap. I think it was like $10 for a 10 pack. I would definitely buy a 10 sleeve of these if you're going to have one of these mini bikes. A 15/16 3/8 socket. Works good to hammer that down in there. You never want to hammer on the center of the bearing. You want to keep it real light. What we're going to eventually do to these wheels is drill and insert a grease element, and we're going to pop the inside inside seal on the bearing so we can pump, you know, oil in there. So I'm going to pump a little bit in the center. Put our cap on this hog. Now we can put the wheel on the bike now with fresh bearings. There we go. Our bolt is greased to help just a little wear on that axle bolt. So what's weird is if you tighten this all the way, it jams up. So that's what killed my bearings, is I tightened this all the way. Now it's good, but you can't tighten this all the way. It needs a little spacer because this fork is pushing against the outside race of the bearing and locking it in. So we'll have to do something about that later, but for now, that's spinning perfectly fine. You can see how dirty that chain lube is. It ate all that crap out of there by letting it sit. So this chain is still perfectly fine, but it does waste a lot of chain lube. But at the same time, it's saving me from buying new DID chain, which isn't cheap. So highly recommend doing this. I can't remember. Great, now my master link's in there. But look at the lube off that. Pretty dirty. All right, so Lonnie's bike took a little bit of abuse on the trip. You can see this foot peg is bent back pretty hardcore, and it cracked the metal right there. So we didn't gusset his. Mine, we put a slant gusset, which kept mine from bending. Somehow we bent his kickstand, which it worked fine, no big deal. Chain is pretty stretched. I didn't kick it any, did you?
I didn't kick it either.
His exhaust hanger came off, so now his exhaust is not supported back here, which will end up cracking his manifold. So we're going to tension the chain, sprocket, and everything looks good. I like that yours has a steel sprocket. Mine's got aluminum. I need to swap that out. We're going to service his CVT just like we did mine, change the oil in the engine. We're going to try to, we probably won't be able to show it, but we're going to get in there and adjust his valves, check his air filter, and fix this. This will be the last thing we do. We're going to cut that weld a little bit more and just ratchet strap it, bend this back straight, and then we're going to add the gussets to it, weld in a piece of slant metal in there. Anything else you think it needs? fuel filter, we'll check it. So we're doing the same service we did on the last bike on this one. They're all the same, but just wanted to show a damage report. We're going to knock this out off camera. But oh, and the belt, this is wrong belt, by the way. And look how loose it is. It's sitting down in the CVT pull. Your belt should really ride a hair bit above it. So this is a wrong belt, and it's worn slap out. His fender
chipped the front fender.
It's chipped and cracked somewhere right here. This seam is cracked all the way down. His fenders, I've seen better days. They've been on it for a while. We go through about a set of fenders a year on this hog. But we'll buy new fenders for it, get it tip-top shape. His frame's been powder coated. It's had all the stuff done to it, so we're good to go on it. So we're just going to tune this thing up. Oh, check wheel bearings. We'll spin his tires around, see what they feel like. Does that feel pretty good? See if you got any side-to-side movement. Let me hold your handlebars.
No, it feels pretty good.
Okay. Ooh, about fell backwards.
Oh, look at me! There's a little more damage now.
So the next one after this, we'll do a damage report on the e-bike, and we got to tear it completely down for powder coat.
It got rode the least.
Yeah.
So I would say it's
pretty good, and it was.
Good, yeah.
But we got to take it to powder coat, so we got to strip it completely down. So let's get this mug serviced. So we're just changing the oil in Lonnie's bike, and look at that. I don't know why it won't focus, but look at that. That is a lot of debris. So let's see what this oil looks like when he drains it. Coming out pretty slow. Probably chunky boy. Oh yeah, it looks pretty metallic-y, just like the Chinese engine looked. But this is, I mean, believe it or not, this is the first hard run this engine's had. So it sounds stupid, but there's a lot of break-in that happens on these engines, unfortunately, and you get this. That's why we always say check out these on rbgcars.com, because that crap would have been in our rod bearing if not. So we'll let this drain, get some fresh oil. We've serviced the CVT. We didn't have the correct belt. This one's kind of tight. We got the chain tightened. We're going to grease it or lube it outside. We need to still put that back on. But what's funny is this one had a 725 belt. The other one had a 669. I thought I'd said it wrong and said 699, but it was 669. This is 725. I'm gonna have to see what they actually recommend for this bike on belt size. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean.
But she flowing. No, the oil don't look horrible. Not as bad as the Chinese. This looks bad, but again, hopefully. Just initial break-in.
It would look bad if that was just in it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll get this hog done.
For sure.
Oh, and we hit this with a hammer and bent it back. And we just got a weld a brace in there to support that. All right, so that's it for this maintenance video. We actually did the e-bike. We broke it completely down and got it ready for powder coat. We found no issues with it. There was nothing, you know, with an e-bike, we don't have a CVT. We don't have to worry about a belt. We literally just have the chain. And before the meetup, Dave, when he was working here, to help me get ready, he built a chain tensioner. So that thing worked flawless because that e-bike has a ton of power and we had to get a chain tensioner on it. So we will do a video as soon as we put that e-bike back together. It's one of our favorite bikes. It's completely different. I don't know if I would say I would choose it over a gas bike on the trail. It's just a completely different feel. I don't really think it's comparable. Like the gas bike shines in certain areas and the e-bike shines in other areas is the best way to put it. But we enjoyed both of them. We, us, Market EC, Lonnie, we all rode it on the trail and we all liked it, but we like switching out from gas to electric. But I highly recommend checking out Electric & Co. I keep calling them Electro & Co. They have some awesome products, and we're about to build an electric buggy, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be a sick build with an even more powerful setup on the buggy. It's going to be a single-seater, super lightweight. We're using a super rare go-kart frame that we found. One of our buddies found it up in Johnson City. Randy, the guy that we built the Black Yerf dog back in the day for, he found it for us and picked it up for us. So we got a really cool rare go-kart we're going to make electric. So stay tuned for that. So let us know what you thought about this video on maintenance of our bikes. We do this after every large ride, and you can see it's much needed. Like, we beat on them pretty hard, and I think Lonnie's foot peg got bent because we get down in a rut and they stick out. They have to stick out to clear the CVT, and it just caught on something. So we've got it protected. We went ahead and welded in some metal there. We'll hit it with some black spray paint to protect it in the future from rusting up. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to check out the links in the video description. We did put those bearings and everything down there, so make sure to check those out. If you have one of these bikes, they're handy to keep a sleeve. They're super cheap, and you're going to wear through them. You know, probably switch out bearings once a year. So thank you guys for checking it out. We love you, and God bless.